All right, hello everybody. I'm going to reintroduce myself. I know I did this last week, but just a reminder in case you're new or you don't know who I am. My name is Alexis. I'm a part of the teen youth group here today. I'm focusing on the struggles of identity issues that I see in my peers, something that we've all gone through, and I want to help. So, we are on our second week of self worth. Our first week of self worth was kind of getting a good understanding of what it was. And now we're going to kind of go into recognizing the negative things we do to ourselves. We're going to learn the barriers of self worth. And to get into that, I am going to start by saying three statements. And I want you to kind of think in your head as I say them, which one of these three statements sticks to me the most? And I'm going to start with I am proud of how hard I worked. Number two, I'll never be good enough. And number three, I don't have to be perfect to have value. If we were to read those three, the one that's going to stick with us the most, the one that stands out the most, is going to be number two, I'll never be good enough. Do we agree? Yeah. And that's just because that's where your negative bias is going to be. That's kind of what I call it. It's kind of when you have that false narrative in your head about yourself, and when you hear a negative connotation or a negative statement, it kind of confirms that false narrative you have about yourself. And that's why it's a little bit more detrimental. It's a little bit more sticky when it's said. And it's also can be looked at as a threat, saying something that's negative could be a threat to your character. It could be completely wrong. It's just something that's going to stand out a little extra. And that's where I'm going to get into the negative self talk, because that's what it is. If you were to tell yourself, I'll never be good enough, that's a perfect example of negative self talk. And what negative self talk is I kind of like to explain it as like a devil and an angel on your shoulder. You always have that inner good critic and bad critic, but definitely an inner critic, I would say. And that negative self talk is when you use words like, I'm not good enough, I'll never get this right, nobody cares. It impacts your mental health. It impacts that false narrative you may have about yourself. It Everyone is strong, but everyone also has a point. The more you beat yourself down, the more you'll get to that point where you are beaten down. Um, it's kind of putting something that wasn't existent into existence. I kind of see it that way. And what this does is it chips away at who you are as a person. Um, and a good example of that would be I was in dance class for a long time, a little bit more in my late middle school years, early high school years. But in dance class, negative self talk was almost my motivator. I used it as. And people can see it as that, and it may seem like a good thing, but eventually you're going to believe that those things are true. You're not going to believe them to be better. You're going to believe them to be true. And that's why we have to stay away completely from the negative self talk. It will not get you to be your best self. It's not criticizing yourself in a positive way. It will beat you down. So that's why I want to really express giving yourself grace with whatever you do. Um, Another example is like failing a test. Um, it can make you think that if you say, I'm stupid, I was never going to get it right anyway, those things aren't going to help you in the long run. They keep you almost at a standstill, and sometimes they kind of regress the progress you've made with yourself. So instead of saying, I'm stupid, I'll never be good at that, you could say, I'll study harder next time. Things like that, giving yourself grace for just being a human on this earth. It's not an easy thing. And that is something anybody can relate to. And another thing that is probably one of the worst, I think, devils is the comparison. You can compare anything to anybody, anywhere, at any time, and it's so easy to compare yourself to something you see on the internet, or people at school who are getting a little bit more attention than you are or recognition than you are, can kind of lead us to believe that we need to be like them to get that recognition, or we need to look like them to get that attention. But what that's going to do is it's going to create jealousy. It's going to create insecurity. It's going to create feelings of almost hatred instead of wanting to be better. And it's okay to want to be better for yourself. It's okay to further your looks. It's okay to work out to look better. But the thing is we have to still love ourselves in the present. We still have to love who we are, even if we are not fully comfortable with who we are. We still have to allow ourselves to be the human beings that we are and give grace for growing instead of beating ourselves down to get there. We are never going to get to a good spot by hating yourself or saying negative things about yourself or comparing yourself to a celebrity. That's not going to get you in the celebrity spot. It will get you a very different way, and it's not going to get you in the celebrity spot. It'll probably get you somewhere very low, because when you start to compare yourself and you start to get those insecurities, that's when you start to lose the acknowledgement of your self-worth. And another thing I personally always struggle with, and to this day still struggle with, is the perfectionism. I would consider perfectionism a character trait of mine, which isn't always a bad thing, but it's not always good. It's okay to want to do your best, but even if you make a mistake, knowing that you did your best should be the thing that makes it okay. And what I mean by that is, even though you thought you did absolutely amazing and you got a C, okay, I got a C, and I thought I did perfect. Okay, I did everything right. I studied everything I was supposed to study. I got a C. That doesn't make me any less than who I was. I tried my best on that test. I studied the material I needed to study. Maybe I didn't study the right way, but those are the times where we can use that as a great learning curve. That's what life gives us, is learning curves. I think instead of bumps in the road, I think those are more of like lessons in the road. Sometimes people go through it and learn the lesson of that bump in the road, and sometimes it's a bump in the road and you get stuck. And some people are at that level, and I was at that level when it came to perfectionism, especially with my academics. I pressured myself in academics. I pressured myself in my dance that I did, and that's okay. But I did it in a toxic way to where eventually I started to resent my academics. I started to resent getting an A. I started to resent trying when nobody else did. That's kind of how it felt in those moments. And that's why I'm really exaggerating the perfectionism and the oh my goodness, the comparison. Is that a word? I'm not sure, but it is a word today. I like to preface those, especially in this day and time. It's super, super big with the social media technology. It's almost hard to get away because we hold our phones in our hand all the time. We always have it on us. It's easy to pull up our phone and compare yourself right then and there. And that's where I think a lot of it has gone wrong with the technology and the social media. Young people kind of exposing themselves to that social media and it becoming more of a competition than what it initially intended to be. And we will talk a lot more about that when we get into the comparison of social media, which I think that is one of our lessons here. Yeah, social media influence. We will talk a lot about the perfectionism and comparing yourselves to others with social media influence. And one thing I added in my wrap up thought was these three boundaries aren't something that you have on the outside. There's something that's kind of like implanted, and they grow on the inside, kind of like a monster. Like people like to compare their anxiety to a monster growing inside of their heads, or it's like a cancer eating away at you, that toxic organism eating away at you, but it's implanted there. And it is implanted there by the things we have around us, by the social standard we have, by the social media, but more than anything, ourselves. We plant the perfectionism and comparing and the negative self-talk because we allow it to continue. We allow it to exist. It was brought up to us at one point. I'm not saying like we made up these things. Obviously, we were exposed to the perfectionism, comparing yourself online or at school, anywhere, the negative self-talk. We're kind of sometimes taught to do those things to be better, but that's when kind of that seed is implanted, but it starts to grow when you kind of allow it to be there. You recognize, not that you recognize it, it's hard to explain what I'm trying to say. It's not that you're recognizing what you're doing, it's you're allowing it to be a part of yourself. And when you allow the negative self-talk to be a part of yourself and the comparison and the perfectionism to be a part of yourself, is when that's really going to knock you down, because it takes the complete meaning of self-worth away. It's what it does, because if I don't look like this, I don't have worth. If I don't get a good grade, I don't have worth. It's the common things that destroy our self-worth and destroy our self-esteem. And that's why I really want to focus on everybody recognizing how they talk to themselves, comparing themselves, the perfectionism they have, that nobody is going to be perfect at all, even when it is set up to be that way, set up to look like that. Nothing is going to be perfect. Nothing is comparable to anything, I think, because everybody is their own being. We have this kind of standard that this person's popular or this person's pretty and this person's ugly, but I think the beauty of humans is that everybody's different in their own way. We don't really have, if you think about it, there's not really anything set up to say this is ugly or this is not. It's ourselves that set that up, or the society that sets us up, or our friends around us that set us up. But that is completely not true, and that's kind of where I want to turn that ball around with this. And a good question that goes along with that is, which one of these barriers, the negative self-worth, the comparison, the perfectionism, do you notice most in your life? I'll go first. I think it's the perfectionism, just from some of the things that I've went through. It kind of, that self-pressure to be perfect, like getting good grades, doing what I'm supposed to, the normal stuff, but it's to the point where it becomes toxic, where I kind of beat myself down to be better instead of give myself grace to be better. And that's probably something I still need to work on to this day. But I want everyone to think on their own right now, out of the negative self-talk, the comparison, or the perfectionism, which one of those do you see most in your life? I see the perfectionism. You have any?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
So I kind of relate to you. I definitely struggle with perfectionism,
Mm-hmm.
which I kind of feel like negative self-talk and perfectionism
Yeah.
both sit next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I'm obviously out of school now,
Right.
but something that I carried from my school days into even my 9 to 5 job is the sentence, if this happens, then this will then I'll feel this way.
Right.
So, and you kind of have already touched on that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like in school, I was a super big perfectionist on my grades
Right.
and studying and passing all the tests.
Mm-hmm.
And actually into my job, that has turned into, if I make this amount of money, then I'll be happy, or then I'll feel successful. So it kind of goes with like the negative self-talk too, because then like if you don't meet those marks, then you start self-sabotaging.
Right.
So my challenge for myself has always been to look at my thoughts around, if I'm starting to feel pressure on perfectionist of being a perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, what am I thinking right now? And it
Right.
always comes back to, if this happens, then I'll feel this.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And yes, that's definitely a big one, and it's definitely a big thing to just kind of let go, especially when we kind of set that stuff up for ourselves. In my, even right now, like in my high school years, kind of set that stuff up for ourselves. But I know I have to remind myself to this day, like, it's okay. It is what it is. I did my best. That, and the third. But regrounding is something that I still have to remind myself to do.
Yeah,
when it
and
comes
just
to
remembering
perfectionism.
that, especially as a perfectionist, like I really had to be like, okay, I can't change the circumstance,
Mm-hmm.
but I can change my thoughts,
Right.
and I can change how I show up, and that
Right.
will hopefully create the result.
Definitely. Cannot change what happens, but you can change your reaction to it.
Yeah.
Definitely a big one. And a big thing that a lot of people don't talk about. But a lot of people go through too. It's not talked about enough, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely not.
And that's where I want to lead off into our last discussion questions. And the first one was, how does comparison affect the way we see ourselves in friendships or on social media? I am going to answer this one a little bit. Comparing ourselves to our friends or social media, I'm just going to give an example for this one. I used to have this best friend. Me and her were two peas in a pod, completely the same person. That's what we based our friendship off of. It was just to be the same person. And then it just kind of became a battle where we just kind of compared each other so much to where we almost kind of hated each other. Like, and it wasn't necessarily like a jealousy thing. It's just that friendship turned more into a competition than it did anything. And that's where your friendships can go downhill very, very fast, is when we start to compare and start getting jealous of what somebody else has, or what they do, or how they can talk to people, and you can't talk to people like that, certain things like that. Definitely a big one. Does anyone else have anything to add? If not, that's okay.
So it's interesting that you talk about that, like the jealousy specifically. I used to have a friend, and she was like super jealous of some of the things that I had. And honestly, like as I've gotten older, I've learned to look at it like, if I start to feel like jealous or comparing myself, especially on social media, because like that trap of scrolling gets you.
Yes.
Someone's house, someone's car, around Christmas time. I've just started reframing it as a way to show myself like information about myself, about what I want in my life. Like, do I really value that?
Uh-huh.
that thing that they have, or if my friendship is like showing jealousy, is that the type of person that maybe I want to be around, or
Right.
maybe, do I value that?
Mhm.
That's kind of a way that I have started looking at comparison and jealousy, because those are the two things I feel like, especially in friendships with girls.
Yep, definitely with girls. You definitely have experience with that. The girls thing, obviously, and then the reframing, like you said,
Yeah.
is it's just coming back to your values and
Yeah.
what you value as a person and the boundaries you have as a person.
Mhm.
You kind of have to remind yourself of those sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the time sometimes. But the second question is, do you think perfectionism motivates people to do better, or does it hold them back? And I kind of talked about this in the beginning. I kind of try to answer these questions throughout, but perfectionism, like I said, seems like a motivator. You're stupid. Do better. Seems like a motivator, but all it's going to do in the long run is everybody can only take so much every single time. So even if you choose to say those negative things to yourself to do better, it's just you're going to get the same result every time. You're going to flatline every time, not literally, but you're going to be at a standstill every single time because as humans, we can only take so much, and those negative words will tear us down. And for our next or last question is, what's one small way you could fight back against one of these barriers this week? And I like one of the things you said is the reframing, knowing what your values are, what you value as a person yourself, the boundaries you have, and kind of reassessing situations. When we get, oh my gosh, they just got a brand new car, and I didn't get a brand new car for my first car. Like, I'm so jealous. Like, that makes me feel like, maybe my parents just think I didn't do good enough, or that's where we get in that rabbit hole. And that's where we need to stop, and we need to think, do you value having a really, really, really nice car? Imagine the insurance, things like that. Actually sitting down and thinking through things and knowing as yourself, do I want that? Do I value that? Is that something I want? And I kind of stole that from you. I loved what you said. And I think that's one thing we can fight back through all of them. The negative self-talk, the perfectionism, the comparison is actually just sitting down and rethinking, because it honestly is a crazy thought when you think, oh, I don't really want what she has. That was kind of a little erratic of me. That's why it's important to sit back and think about what we're thinking, because our brain is definitely a crazy organ. And for our closing thought of the day, I wrote something down that I found that I really think is something that stuck to me. So I just want to share it with everybody else. And that's barriers to self-worth don't define who you are. They're just obstacles that can be recognized and overcome, like the lessons I talked about. The more you are aware of them, the more you sit down and think about what you're thinking, the easier it is to replace it with the truth, the encouragement, and the grace. Most of the time, what you're saying to yourself isn't the truth. You're not giving yourself grace, and it's not encouraging. It's the opposite. So I want everybody listening, everybody here, anytime you notice you comparing yourself, you trying to be perfection, and that negative self-talk, anytime you recognize those things, to sit down, give yourself the grace, give yourself the encouragement, and change it. The more you change it in your brain, the more it becomes like a second hand to you. That's how we retrain our brain. Your brains are retrainable, and that's where I kind of go back to that short-term thinking, where people think, I'm just like this. I'm just like this. I just don't like going in public. I just don't like people. That's that short-term thinking, where you kind of just allow yourself to be at that low point when you can do so much better. And that's why I want everyone to replace those negative thoughts with good ones, give yourself the grace, and give yourself the encouragement, so your brain can actually be aware that that's true. And the barriers to self-worth is something that everybody can overcome, and everybody needs to be instilling in their lives. And that is our lesson for today. Our lesson 3 of next week, we're going to actually understand building that self-worth. So we're kind of learning how to recognize what we're doing right now, recognizing that negative self-talk, the comparison, and we're going to learn how to switch it. But next week, I want to focus on actually applying the switch, applying the encouragement, applying the grace, because it's easy to say those things, but sometimes people don't know how to do it. They just don't. So I really want to go through that next week. And then that leaves us with week 4, living out the encouragement and the grace, actually living with that self-worth, learning how to apply it to your life and daily situations. But thank you for joining today. I'm glad everyone is here. I'm glad everyone listened, and I appreciate your time listening to me. I hope something really stuck with somebody today, whatever I said, and they can learn to switch those negative words into positive ones. But thank you for listening, and thank you for listening.
You're